Hello and welcome to Basics for Gamers presents The Basics of Dispel Magic. This may be the single most confusing spell in all of Dungeons & Dragons. In fact, a simple search on the Sage Advice blog returns more than 2,200 hits when you search for Dispel Magic. But don't worry, we have you covered. In this video we're going to break down exactly what this spell does, what it can affect, what it can't affect, as well as the results of using it. And at the end, we're going to do a lightning round where we explain how exactly Dispel Magic works with a number of the most commonly confused examples. First things first, Dispel Magic may be the most poorly worded spell in all of Dungeons & Dragons, because it, in fact, does not dispel magic, at least not in the broadest sense. Instead, it ends spells. So it doesn't work on all magic, but just a specific type of magic, being spells. When pondering questions over if Dispel Magic interacts with something and what the results would be, it might be helpful to not even call it Dispel Magic. Instead, think of it as if it was called Spell Interruption, because that's what the spell does, and that's the only thing this spell does. Before we get into the mechanics, let's look at what Dispel Magic does in the narrative of the game world. Magic in D&D is typically used to either create an effect or to sustain an effect. So take a +1 magic sword for example. Magic was probably used at some point to create that sword, but no magic is still being used today to sustain the sword. No wizard is concentrating to keep the sword magical. The sword's not going to just blink out of existence if concentration is broken or after a set duration of time passes. Now compare that to a cleric who casts Spiritual Weapon. This spell summons a spectral weapon floating in the air and it lasts for 1 minute. Magic was used to create it, but unlike that +1 magic sword, magic is also being used to sustain its existence. After 1 minute, when the magic that tethers the spiritual weapon to the material plane passes, it is no longer being sustained and the spiritual weapon blinks out of existence. And the distinction between using magic to create an effect and using magic to sustain an effect is very important because Dispel Magic has only one function. It causes spells to end. Therefore, it has nothing to do with magic that has been used in the past to create an effect and may only be used against magic currently being used to sustain an effect. It severs the magical tether that's keeping the magical effect active and immediately ends it. Now that's a narrative explanation of what Dispel Magic does, but mechanically speaking, it causes spell effects with a duration greater than instantaneous to immediately end. That's all there is to it. Many people try to bend their understanding of the words Dispel Magic to apply the spell to any magical effect. But again, remember, Dispel Magic only causes active spells with a duration longer than instantaneous to immediately cease. It cancels out magic being used to sustain a spell effect and has no effect against magics that were used in the past to create an object or magical effect. Now that we understand what Dispel Magic is used for, let's talk about how the spell functions. The spell targets one creature, object, or magical effect. When cast, all spell effects on the target of a spell level equal to or lower than the spell slot used to cast Dispel Magic automatically end, unless the spell used to cast the effect had a duration of instantaneous. All spell effects on the target of a higher spell level than the spell slot used to cast Dispel Magic are removed if the caster succeeds on an ability check using their spellcasting ability. The DC for this check is 10 plus the spell's level and is rolled individually for each effect on the target. Okay, so let's break this down. First, what can you target with Dispel Magic? The description says one creature, object, or magical effect. If an ally of yours is under the effects of a sleep spell, you can target that person, a creature, to remove the sleep effect. If a coin is under the effect of a light spell, you can target that coin, an object, with Dispel Magic to remove the light effect. If a portion of a room is under the effect of a darkness spell, you can target that magical effect, the zone of darkness, and use Dispel Magic to end the darkness spell. Those are a few simple textbook examples, but let's explore some trickier situations. When you target a creature or object, you remove all the spell effects active on that target. So for example, an ally of yours is under the effects of a slow spell and a bless spell. If you cast Dispel Magic on that ally, you can't pick and choose. You can't say, I'm only going to remove the slow spell and not affect the bless spell. Dispel Magic is all or nothing. It's either going to try to remove both those spell effects or none of them. If a spell has multiple targets, for example, one of your foes casts Bless and applies it to 3 of your enemies. This counts as 3 individual spell effects. So you can target one of them and remove Bless from it with Dispel Magic, but that will not also remove Bless from the other targets even though they all received Bless from a single casting of that spell. But compare that to a web spell that has 3 of your friends trapped in it. In this case, you can target the single web effect and dispel it to free all of your trapped friends. The distinction is that Bless is cast once and applies its effect to up to 3 different targets, whereas Web is cast once and its effect is applied to one zone. Second, we know Dispel Magic only works on spell effects, so let's define what a spell effect is. A spell effect is the result of a spell, class abilities that consume spell slots to use. Some paladin abilities, for example, require the expenditure of spell slots to use, although the ability itself is not called a spell, and any ability or power that specifically has the word spell or cantrip in it. For example, a monk using Empty Body can spend key points to cast the Astral Projection spell. Since that ability says spell in it, this is a spell effect and can be removed with Dispel Magic. But a vampire's charm ability has no mention of spells in it, therefore it is not a spell effect, and Dispel Magic cannot be used to free the victim of a vampire's charm power. Also note that the rules for Dispel Magic don't really care where the spell effect comes from. All that matters is that it is a spell effect. For example, the rules don't care if the spell was cast by a wizard using its own spell slots, if it was cast from a scroll or with a wand. All spells once cast are treated the same. And this might make you wonder, what if you cast Dispel Magic on a potion of heroism? Will it just turn that potion into normal water? Well, no, Dispel Magic has no effect on a magic item that casts spells, but it would interact with the spell after it is cast as usual. So casting Dispel Magic on a potion does nothing, but casting Dispel Magic on a person who has consumed that potion of heroism would remove the bless effect from that person, but would not remove the 10 temporary hit points that are received from drinking that same potion of heroism, because those are not a spell effect. And the third point of the spell's explanation that we need to discuss is spell duration. Remember, Dispel Magic only serves to sever magic that is being used to sustain a spell, not magic that was used in the past to create a spell effect. Therefore, any spell with a listed duration of instantaneous is completely immune to Dispel Magic. Magic was only used to create the effect in the instant the spell was cast, and no magic is being used after to sustain it. Therefore, the spell must have a duration longer than instantaneous to be susceptible to Dispel Magic. And this may raise the question, what if the duration of the spell is permanent? A duration of permanent essentially means forever until dispelled. In fact, in most instances, you won't see the duration literally labeled as permanent, but instead says until dispelled. Therefore, yes, permanent effects may be removed with Dispel Magic. But remember, it must be a spell with a duration of permanent. This does not mean that you can render a +1 magic sword mundane with Dispel Magic. A lot of people sometimes think a +1 magic sword is just a sword with a permanent magic weapon spell effect on it, but that's not the case. Nowhere in the description of the magic weapon spell does it mention anything about the effect becoming permanent. There is no active spell functioning on a +1 magic sword, or magic being used to sustain its existence, therefore there's nothing to interrupt with Dispel Magic. Now, Private Sanctum, on the other hand, is a spell that becomes permanent if it is cast on the same spot every day for a year. In this case, a permanent Private Sanctum could be removed by casting Dispel Magic on it. Because Private Sanctum is a spell, and +1 magic sword is not a spell. Also, Dispel Magic does not remove the permanent consequences of a spell. For example, a wish spell is cast to conjure a spectral ghost ship. The Dispel Magic will have no effect on the ghost ship. It may be the permanent consequences of a spell, but that spell, the wish spell, has a duration of instantaneous, and therefore there is no active spell remaining to be dispelled from the ghost ship. With all of that in mind, let's do a lightning round and just quickly review if Dispel Magic would work in a number of commonly questioned situations. When pondering if Dispel Magic will work, always ask yourself 2 questions. Is there an active spell effect? And again, a spell effect is going to have the word spell or cantrip associated with it in some manner. And second, is the spell's duration anything other than instantaneous? If so, magic is being used to sustain the effect. If magic was used to create it and not sustain it, then you can't dispel it. So let's review these examples. Will Dispel Magic work on a creature created with the Animate Dead spell? No, Animate Dead has a duration of instantaneous. Dispel Magic does not function on instantaneous spells or the permanent consequences of those spells. Would Dispel Magic work to undo a banishment spell? Yes, but you would need to somehow be able to target the actual victim of the spell. Targeting the caster or the location of the banishment would have no effect. What about a Beholder's Eye Rays, like its Sleep Ray and Slow Ray? No, you cannot dispel these, because they are magical, but the word spell does not appear in the description for a Beholder's Eye Rays. Therefore, they may be magic, but they're not spells and cannot be dispelled. What about a shape-changed doppelganger? No, the doppelganger's shape-changer ability is not a spell, therefore Dispel Magic would not revert the doppelganger back into their true form. A dragon breath attack. No, they are magic, but they're not spells. A druid using their wild shape ability. Again, no, you cannot dispel this because it's not a spell. It's magic, but it's not a spell. A Dryad's Fey Charm. Same situation. It's not a spell. It cannot be dispelled. An elemental walks through a portal into the material plane. Can you dispel that elemental? No, because there is no spell magic being used to sustain that elemental. But what about an elemental who is summoned via the Conjure Elemental spell? Yes, you could dispel that elemental. At any time within the listed 1 hour duration for the spell, Dispel Magic can be used to end the spell that's sustaining the elemental, and it will just simply blink out of existence. How about the victim of a Feeble Mind spell? No, because the spell's duration is instantaneous. How about a person who's under the influence of Gesh, or Gias, or whatever your pronunciation of choice is? Yes, that spell can be dispelled with Dispel Magic. How about using Dispel Magic against a Globe of Invulnerability? Yes, you can remove a Globe of Invulnerability by casting Dispel Magic. And here's a situation that comes up in many of the games I play in. What about a golem? We know golems are magic, so can't we just use Dispel Magic to get rid of them? And the answer is no, because there are no active spells. Magic may have been used to create the golem, such as using a manual of golems, but no active spell is being used to sustain its existence, and there's no active spell effect to be dispelled, so therefore Dispel Magic has no effect at all on golems. What about an object that is created by illusory reality? No, illusory reality is not a spell, so Dispel Magic will have no effect on that object. A creature under the effects of an invisibility spell. Yes, you could dispel invisibility from a creature, however, you have to be aware that the creature is there. If the creature is invisible but not taking the hide action, their location should be known and you would be able to target them and remove that effect. A magic sword, as mentioned previously, no, there's no active spell effect to be cancelled on a magic sword, so Dispel Magic has no effect at all on magic weapons. And last, a monk's key abilities. The description says that key is magical, but only monk abilities that specifically mention the word spell can be dispelled by Dispel Magic. All other key abilities are magical, but they're not spells, therefore they cannot be dispelled. In this video, we examined Dispel Magic. Dispel Magic is used to prematurely end the active effects of a spell. It might be better thought of as spell interruption because that's what it does, and the only thing that it does. Dispel Magic cancels the magic being used to sustain a spell effect, but has no effect on magics used in the past to create an object or spell effect. Dispel Magic targets a single creature, object, or magical effect. If targeting a creature or object with several spell effects on them, all of those effects are subject to being removed. The caster of Dispel Magic may not choose to leave beneficial spells alone. If a spell affects multiple targets, each target is an independent spell effect. For example, a single Bless spell grants its effect to 3 people. You can target one of them and dispel the Bless effect from them, but that will not remove Bless from the others. You can also target magical effects, like a Zone of Darkness, that can be targeted and removed with Dispel Magic. Once cast, all eligible spell effects on the target of a spell level equal to or lower than the spell slot used to cast Dispel Magic immediately end. If the target has a spell effect of a spell level higher than the spell slot used to cast Dispel Magic, then the caster makes an ability check using their spellcasting ability, and the DC for that check is 10 plus the spell level of the effect to be dispelled. When cast on a target with multiple spell effects, the caster makes a separate ability check for each of the spell effects being removed. Dispel Magic only works against spell effects. A spell effect is the result of a spell, class abilities that consume a spell slot when used, and any ability or power specifically with the word spell or cantrip in it. Any magical ability that does not specifically associate it with the word spell or cantrip is not a spell effect and is not affected by Dispel Magic. And a spell effect must have a duration in order to be dispelled. Any spell with a duration of instantaneous cannot be dispelled as its magic has already passed in the moment that it was cast. Spells made permanent per their descriptions can be dispelled unless their descriptions specifically say otherwise. For example, a wall of stone that is made permanent cannot be dispelled per the language in its description. With that, we'll bring this video to a close. If you found this video helpful, please give us a like, and don't forget to click that subscribe button and the bell so you never miss out on our future videos. Leave us a comment letting us know what topics you'd like to see covered in our future videos, and we can always be reached through our Twitter and Facebook pages too. If you'd like to use some of the maps that we feature in our videos in your own games, you can find them at Maps of Mastery. A link to that store can be found in the description. Thanks for watching, take care, and we'll see you soon with more basics for your favorite tabletop games.